Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and MBs, and welcome to Warui Deshou's Deshou the Third podcast, the self-replicating name podcast. Pretty much, we just keep repeating our own our own parts of it there. I'm Shadon, perennial Command and Conquer Kane cosplayer here, and joining me as always from across the pond is the Subtle Doxer.
Hi, fam. How's it going? I hope everybody is doing well. I hope everybody is as safe and healthy as they can be. Shadon,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pleased to be joining you for the second time this week. And
Indeed.
this is going to be, I think, a more, I don't know if
Uniformly positive.
well, yes, there's that, and just it's like a different kind of heaviness. You know what I mean? That different kind of heaviness. The subject matter.
Melancholy is the word you're looking
Yeah,
for.
because I don't want to be like this is light or something like that. But uh, but yeah, no, it's gonna be a lot of fun. It is gonna be fun but it's similarly like Monday. Like there's a lot to chew on, so I'm looking forward to it. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm excited. I hope the patrons are excited.
Hell yeah, and shouts to the patrons of D for helping support us and making this podcast possible. And also shouts to Yukinon, who has been a long time advocate for Girls Last Tour, who finally got to see it, given the full treatment by us, especially with this final episode. And what a journey it has been indeed. It has been very, very worthwhile indeed. So thank you, Yukinon, for being such a staunch advocate of this show. And finally getting to see, it be covered by us. It's quite an honor.
It's almost like if
Indeed.
if you meet hardships and obstacles and it seems like there's no hope for you achieving what you want to achieve, if you just like keep at it, then you can find meaning and you can find happiness in what does befall you and what you make of it. It's almost like that.
Amazing, amazing. Love it. So, for those of you wondering what the heck we're talking about, if you happen to have caught this on the free swear and have not listened to any of the other podcasts we've done in this series or in general, Deshou the Third is our top tier patron exclusive podcast where we cover a show that has been requested by a patron or potentially has been suggested by us, but is ultimately democratically voted on. So all our patrons get to decide, yes, let's put the hosts of Warrior Deshou through this abominable piece of shit and, drink their tears like, wine from the heavens. Or, hey, maybe they might enjoy this as something to discuss and ruminate on. That's the thing I prefer, by the way.
Thankfully, it's been nothing but that. It's only been the
It's
latter.
yeah.
But we don't know what the future
latter, yeah.
holds. You know what I mean?
Maybe might have given people inspiration at this point. Maybe they're going to
Yeah.
make us watch something truly, truly wretched. I mean, who knows? We'll find out. But
like you thought you hated Redo of a Healer based on episode 1. We're gonna
have a redo of a healer, aren't we? Yeah, Jesus
gonna make
Christ.
you watch that. That'd be terrible. I don't think anyone would want to participate in that.
Don't give them ideas.
Yeah.
Don't give them ideas, honestly, I've been told before that my brand is apparently watching some atrocious shit and then, screaming at it. So, yeah. Anyway, but that's the idea of this podcast. We're here to talk today about the show we've been covering on Deshou the Third for the entirety of 2021, which is Girls Last Tour. And this is indeed the last Girls Last Tour pod, but not the end of their journey, although it does come to a very strong resolution, in my opinion. Yes, it does. Doc there, if you're listening on the audio, he's, drawing, he's bringing his finger down beside his eyes to make it look like he's crying. Although I like to believe, actually, that's just him applying his war paint because he's going out for a fight later on.
Yes, right. You caught me.
That's basically...
You caught me.
That's my guess. Anyway, so you might think to yourself, hey, that sounds pretty good. Maybe I will make Shads and Doc watch some, terrible stuff that, might get them arrested if anyone asks about it in public. And if you want to do that, you just pop over to our Patreon at patreon.com/Warrior Deshou. We have 3 tiers, $2, $3, $5 of increasing reward at the expense of more value from yourself, of course. The top dollar tier, the $5 one, gets you access to all 3 of our podcasts ad-free. And in addition, allows you to ask questions about the pods as we go along. All of them, all the shows we cover, you get to vote on them. Plenty of other perks as well. Access to our Discord, you name it. Get over to patreon.com/Warrior Deshou. Check it out.
But JM,
Yes, indeed.
Sound
And
effects.
so we're going to move on fairly quickly to talking about the show. We do have some Patreon questions to cover.
Mm.
We're specifically covering episodes 9 through 12 today,
Hmm.
of which there will be quite a fair bit to talk about, no doubt. And then we'll, of course, give our summation of the show as we feel about it also. What we don't do in this particular podcast format is give a recitation or, a recap of the plot of all the episodes in laborious detail.
No.
We're here more for the talking points, but we will provide context as we go. And that's really all you need to know. So get yourself comfortable, and we'll
Yeah.
crack on talking about this show because there's certainly a lot to discuss. Do we
Oh,
want to go through Crazy Spark?
yeah. I was gonna say. So I have, in the spirit of recognizing the people that work on
Mm.
this anime, because this anime that we watch and that we love and that we parse and is generally a conversation topic among us denizens of the internet. It does not materialize out of thin air. It is not discovered in some sort of mine. It is created by hardworking people in Japan. And so there's only one new person for us to talk about this time. As again, you may not remember from the previous episodes, there's only one writer that we've talked about, the head writer and the writer of all the scripts, Kazuyuki Furiyasu. We have
Mhm.
talked about them before, and all of the episode directors, save one, have worked on prior episodes in this. So there's a collection of 6 episode directors that directed all
Mm.
the episodes of this show. And the only one we have not mentioned is Tomoko Hiramuki, who directed episode 10. And Hiramuki has a pretty impressive resume, I got to be honest with you, in terms of being an episode director. It looks like that is what they do. I mean, apart from some storyboarding, which is pretty common for directors to be involved with, there's like 90 to 95% of their credits are directorial credits, not for a show as a whole, but for an episode here or there, but occasionally like a handful of episodes. And the thing that like jumps out at me is like, okay, here's a franchise that this person has been working on quite a bit, is Inazuma 11 or the Lightning 11 or this really fun and popular soccer anime. It's sort of like if you took your standard sports anime and made it shonen and gave it a little bit of your Dragon Balls or your Yu Yu Hakusho's, like just a little bit of a few drops, for added
And then, and
spice.
then you, and then you and then you mix vigorously until it forms a consistent, like, dough, and you bake in the oven for a couple of hours, and eventually it rises and forms Inazuma 11. You
Yes,
know,
in the shape of
either,
a football.
either I can't tell if you're describing, like, in terms of baking or mixing alcohol together, but either metaphor works for me.
Totally. And this is a little bit surprising, I guess, in some ways, because Inazuma is not a melancholy show at all. So, definitely showing some tonal flexibility. But I guess, I mean, given the rest of the things that this person's directed, I mean, they're all over the map, from things as far back in time as, Get Backers, Darker Than Black, the first season.
The only season, you mean?
Right. We've had this
Let's be clear.
conversation.
Yes, and this is why we need to keep reminding you every time you say the first season. Like, there was no second season, Doc. We're
Okay.
clear on this, and so is the rest of the internet.
Okay. I'll let that go without litigating or relitigating it. Things like Genshiken, pretty old at this point, but like really beloved. To things in the more recent vintage, like some recent seasons of Attack on Titan.
Mhm.
I had Ancient Magus Bride, a couple of episodes of that,
Oh, very good,
and
very good.
The Great Pretender, which just wrapped
Which
up.
I, which I have still not seen, even though it's been. I've heard nothing but good things about it, and I feel bad for having not watched it.
I've heard some not good. I've heard both.
Oh,
But mostly good. I've heard mostly good, but I've heard a
okay,
few
okay.
complaints. And Vinland Saga, an episode of Vinland Saga. So,
Oh,
yeah, it's like a very, I mean, and Rolling Girls. I mean, if you just take those two, like Rolling Girls and Vinland Saga, like the tone of each of those shows is so different that like it should not surprise when you hear like, okay, the director of 12 episodes of Inazuma 11 directed this Girl's Last Tour, episode 10. So that's Tomoko Hiramuki, very accomplished episode director, and directed episode 10 of this show.
nice, nice,
Yeah.
excellent. Right then. That is creatives, which we've got out of the way there. So now we're going to talk about patron questions firstly. And again, these have been submitted by our patrons who subscribe to the $5 here. Thank you very much to everyone who's participated with questions for both this block of episodes and the others that have come before it for Bill's Last Tour. So I'm going to go straight over there now.
Jingle.
We have two questions here from Gogo Atomic Robot. And the first one goes something a little bit like this. What is the origin/nature of the cut? Are they man-made, natural, spiritual, or something else? So we need to firstly establish what the cut are for people who are listening who have not seen the show, in which case, shame on you. Just want to put that
What are
out
you
there
doing
firstly.
watching this one?
What are you
What are you
why do you
doing?
have to say it like a mobster? Like, what are you doing?
What are you doing watching this episode? Go back and watch that.
I'm slipping into Krusty there. I'm sorry about that.
Maybe no. That's they're not mutually exclusive. Maybe Krusty Old Anime Man was also a mob boss in his youth.
It should be more
both.
like,
It could be both.
meh, what are you doing watching these episodes?
Wise guys. Yeah, you need to slip that word in there every couple of times when you're talking in a fake, like, no, mob boss voice. You need to have that in there. Anyway, so the cut. We have seen throughout much of the show's run various statues of worm-like creatures, very plain looking, with this face that I had speculated previously looks an awful lot like Cheese Face.
Cheese
By the
face?
way, all of my
Sorry. So what I thought you just said was spelled
Cheese Face.
CHEESE face, but no, Cheetos.
Cheese. I should just say Chiso then. Although
Cheeto
face
Cheeto
really
face is
work.
also not good.
We're in the vortex here at this point. Let's be honest. So basically, the black-haired girl's face. There we go. That avoids all all association with cheese or cheese quote unquote flavored products. But anyway. So we've seen statues of them throughout, and we, of course, speculated rampantly and wildly on what they might be, much of which it turned out was incorrect. That's the first thing I'm going to admit before we even get to the question, which is a lot of what I speculated might be true or may not be true turned out to be completely bunk, but I'm okay with that. I'm entirely all right with that. And I'm actually going to be talking about later as a talking point, like what it means to speculate on ambiguous elements of media and what the overall intent should be when you do that. But we'll save that for later. That's not answering the question. So the cut, though, we actually find in episode 10, the girls find a very young little sausage creature with a face like that. It's pure white. It's just strange and alien.
Squishy.
And it looks pretty much squishy. And it looks exactly like the statues, just of course on a much smaller scale. And so what happens is they actually...
I didn't pick up on that until they were super explicit about it. I was just like, man, they're really pulling this out of thin air, this, sausage-esque squish ball. But I just was not thinking clearly enough, obviously.
It's fine. But anyway, so the girls actually end up adopting it and taking it with them. And it turns out this creature can communicate via radio waves, both to receive and also to broadcast, which is where the radio that they had picked up previously from the filing cabinet graveyard, which, by the way, a nice sidestep there, because I when they had that, I was like, that's a continuity error, isn't it? Because they put those back, but then of course they acknowledge that no, actually, you lied about it. She did keep it. What? How dare she? Well, anyway, anyway, so it starts to talk to them, and the reason it's called a cut is because they believe it's a cat, and I say it corrects them, but I don't think they're actually literally going to call themselves the Cut. I think that's just the label that they have handy for it, because it says that, and they don't take it to be like, well, this thing's a child, and clearly that's not right. But for the sake of simplicity, we'll call them the Cut. But what happens is that they are led by this little Cut child to the source of a different radio broadcast they've been hearing, which sounded like music. And this took them to a nuclear submarine.
As you know,
obviously.
As you do.
Yep. And then some scenes play out, which I'm going to discuss a little bit later. I'm going to bridge them now, but they meet the adult members of the Cut race, who are resting on the top of, come out of the top of the nuclear submarine from the launch tubes where the nukes are. Yeah. And they reveal that they are slowly consuming what they describe as all thermically, whatever you pronounce it as, unstable material, thermally unstable material. So that's why the Cut we see in a previous point in the show was eating bullets, because bullets, of course, contain gunpowder, you name it, primer, all the elements to make up a bullet, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sucking on like a baby bottle, the 20 caliber bullet or whatever.
And eventually, the plan is that these creatures will multiply in such a way that they will consume all such thermally unstable material on the planet. Now, I have like questions about this, but I'm not going to bother because ultimately, wherever I ask about them, it doesn't really matter. The intent is clear. In doing so, the Earth will, as they say, cool down. It will burn out. You know, that'll be the end of life on the planet, basically.
Yeah, it'll return. It'll go to sleep, right? It'll enter a slumber, hibernate, or something like that for a while until it's ready to bloom into some new life again. It was like, did you get kind of like the vibe of cycles? You know, that this is just kind of a cyclical thing, or is it like the final end of the Earth?
No, I got the impression this was the final end thing, but this will actually tie into my answer about where they come from.
Interesting.
But I'll get to that in just a moment. So they also then turn into mushrooms, mushroom-shaped creatures, like they unfold and stuff, and they fly away. One thing I'll note as well for context for it.
I mean, you've seen that a million times. Fucking just eat missiles and turn into fungi and float off into the sunrise. Just, I've seen it all before, Shadon. I was bored to tears, so
I know. Nothing new. There's nothing new here whatsoever. Seriously,
boring.
Joseph Campbell will be spinning in his grave.
So boring.
Anyway, no, we're of course joking.
Yes.
The one thing I need to know as well is that just in the rope system, I'm providing this context now, so I don't have to provide it later. I'm trying to be efficient like that. Taps forehead.
Thank you.
Which is the reason that they meet the adult Cuts in the first place is because one of them just comes into the command center bridge, who are called the submarine, and literally seems to eat you alive, like just swallows a whole glump. That's what played in my head, by the way. I was just shocked. It was like glump. And then, of course, Cheeto. I know
that's her name.
I can't say it anymore.
That's her name.
That's it. I can't say it anymore. It's ruined now. Ever since you said cheese face, that's it. I'm done.
Sorry.
I might just call her cheese face from now on.
Don't.
Okay, so cheese face. She obviously is very shocked by the fact that her friend has literally just been devoured alive, and runs after them, and that leads them encounter on top. Where you is fine. She gets spat out because they also reveal, as a side note, and this actually is a retroactive explanation for why we see no corpses or bones. They eat dead humans whole.
Oh, somehow I missed that. Oh my god. Okay, well that's a good detail. Yeah. Bad one to miss by me. But,
that retroactive, because that's why I didn't eat her, because she was alive.
Yeah,
but they do eat.
They ate the radio.
They say we don't eat living humans. They must eat dead ones, and therefore that's why all the dead bodies have disappeared.
There's no more. Yeah.
Okay. So, I've given you all the context of it. Now it's time for speculation.
Yeah.
Let's see. I want you also just bear in mind what I'm about to say. I'm going to qualify it with a what I think this means thing, and I think that's important for the point I'm going to make later, so just bear that in mind. I am actually of the opinion the Cut are man-made, and here's my theory on this. Here's my wild theory.
Okay.
I think they were made initially as a weapon to disarm an opposing force by consuming all of their ammunition.
I can see it.
But in the way that a Grey Goose scenario, which I've talked about on the podcast before, often happens, where something we create to like do a particular task runs out, like the fear of nanites or nanomachines going out of control and consuming all before them. Well, I imagine that the cut like didn't start to distinguish between what constituted as that's the bad guy stuff, we should eat that,
Sure.
versus what the good guys should eat, our stuff. And so they've consumed all of it, basically. This would also explain why they can communicate with radio waves, because you can then, of course, control them, or in theory, try to control them. But at some point, they must have evolved beyond that and become a more sentient race. Because, of course, if you're broadcasting stuff to them, then they might have learned language and such. Indeed, that's how it works with the baby cut that we see, where it starts to learn language from them and eventually starts to talk properly. So, okay, that's my rampant speculation here. But what does it mean? Why am I saying this? I've got to have a theory behind this beyond just simply pointing to what makes sense.
Right.
And the reason I think this is I think that if it was true, there's a thematic cohesion with what I think the end of the stories we see in the show is. In the end, warfare has burned itself out. It's another strings to the bow of the idea that in the end, conflict ultimately burns out. And in this case, in a literal sense, because they were created to defeat the enemy, like by destroying all their weapons, but in turn, they destroyed all weapons everywhere.
Yeah.
But also, it then ties into something else, which is that these creatures have grown to have their own sentience, their own intelligence, their own life cycle. They'll probably become the new dominant creatures on the planet until it burns out, and then they might leave somehow. But it also goes to show that even from creating them as a weapon, solely for the purpose of doing this task, there is still something beautiful that comes out of that. Like, life has still been created and it has still flourished, even if it came from the origin point of being made to serve a purpose in war, which ties into a lot of the other things that we see in these final episodes about how conflicts is, something that people can fall into doing very easily, but it's in complete contrast to the beauty of human interaction and human nature that we see, for example, in the submarine with the big montage. So that's my wild, all-encapsulating theory and why I would want it to be true, because I think that it would thematically gel together with everything else that is in the episodes. And it would explain a lot of their particular attributes about why they do consume ammunition, why they can communicate by radio waves. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, I like your theory a lot. I think, some of this depends on whether you still, whether you take at face value everything they're saying, and whether or not you still believe that this is like some kind of purgatory or dreamlike state. And if that's the case, one of Gogo's options about them being kind of spiritual or something like that could possibly still be on the table, but I think the way I'm reading it now is that I am going to take them at their word. And where I think my read on it differs slightly from yours is I don't necessarily think that they're sentient. I still think that they're pretty much like biomachines, and the only
like the robots that we see.
Like the only one that has really begun to have any semblance of like will is Baby Boy. And the others, it seems to me like that they are kind of in a very automatic sort of way just fulfilling the role that they were designed to do. And and I think this is like, I love the point you made about how like we've built, humanity has kind of built its own demise. I mean, I think a lot of these episodes reinforce that theme with the giant, I couldn't help but think of the God Warriors in Nazca, like the big destructive robot that causes fire to the city, with the whole thing with the two robots having different priorities, one safeguarding the fish.
As well?
Yeah, oh totally. Yeah. 100%. That's you're absolutely right about that. And then the two robots with the differing priorities, one protecting the fish, the other dismantling the facilities. They kind of begin to work at cross purposes, which is sort of a microcosm of like, hey, we built these machines to take care of us, but whoops, like the way we've designed them, it turns out like we've planted the seeds for our own destruction. And if not for the intervention of Chi and you, then the poor little fish would have the last fish on Earth would have met its doom there in that one facility. And so yeah, and as far as like where I stand on this, the whole thing being a cycle, not cosmically so or anything like that, or I don't know if there's any like string puller, but like just I believe they use the word slumber, which I could be reading a lot into this, and there is a localization barrier or like variable to factor into this, but like the word slumber to me connotes a reawakening at some point in the future. So if that is like the literal kind of meaning, then that would lead me to believe like that they're doing it so that like, yes, there will be some kind of hibernation where all the horrific weaponry and technology for battle will all be gone away, and then the Earth can be free to kind of evolve again and grow from the very beginning.
Right. So over a long enough time scale, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you when you put it like that. I think I was more thinking in terms of like humanity, like as a. I feel fairly confident now, having watched this show, that there is no return. Like there are a couple people left, certainly, but I don't think there's any coming back at this point. I think that is it for humankind in this particular show.
Bon voyage.
One thing I'll address very quickly, just to clarify my comment, is that Yukino mentioned in chat the cuts don't once become any dominant species. What I mean by that is there's a difference between actively pursuing that and just becoming that by virtue of falling into that place.
They're the only things left. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They will become the dominant species not because they actively want to become a dominant species, just because that's how it works. I mean, look.
Yeah, maybe dominant wouldn't be the
right
right word, but like just they're the ones that are still here. You know, everyone else is dead.
I think it is if you consider like us as a dominant species at the moment, despite everything that's going on, where you like, you know, it's not something we actively wanted to become. We just wanted to better our own position, and that's just led to us falling into this position where you could classify us as that. And I think that falls categorization wise in similar vein for them.
Well, I think we do more just like okay. Yeah, no, I don't want to get too into the weeds. I just personally think that you could categorize what humans do in now and have been doing for a while as, you know, dominating, like mastering nature, like, you know, fuck you seasons,
you, tiger.
Fuck you weapons, you know, tree. Yeah, like we're just like we're fucking manipulating everything for our own situation, so we're sort of dominating the natural order to suit us, whereas like the mushrooms don't seem to be behaving in that way. But I still think your point stands.
Fair enough. Do you have anything to add to do you have your own theory about where the cuts originated from? Anything to add?
Oh no, I mean, like I said, I think beyond the point of points of differentiation I laid out, I think what you established is right on. Totally. I mean, they're man-made, but they have played their part in wiping us out.
I do have an alternative hypothesis because I think that this also has a thematic implication as well, but it's one that I don't think works quite as well. I'm going to bring it up just for the sake of pointing it out, which is you could also, because we see in one of the montage shots that comes from the submarine, various white streaks coming from the sky onto planet Earth. Now, the implication I originally took with that was missiles, nukes, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe as an alternative, the cuts are arriving. They're actually an alien or interloping species. And here's the thing, right? What I'm about to describe here, I want to point something out as a method, as a means of like, you know, equivalence. Because for me, in fiction, when you have aliens arriving that to a planet, like to a time and space, like much like our own now, like in, for example, the film Arrival, you can, if you wanted to, also read that as a form of divine intervention.
Sure.
They are essentially equivalent for the purposes of narrative, and the only difference is in diegetically in what form they take, be they actual flesh and blood aliens or creatures from heaven or hell, whatever you want to call it. The reason I'm bringing that up as a potential reading that you could take of this is because then there's the thematic implication that the only way war could be stopped was because of outside intervention.
Right.
Which is a lot more...
We have been watching you. You have fucked up. Yeah.
We're gonna take your toys away from you, you know?
So what do you then make of the statues that are clearly either fashioned after the cut or are cut themselves, that have been like, you know, I've accomplished my task, therefore I have petrified or something?
You have literally hit the nail on the head as to my interpretation in the latter. Because I think you also have to consider the placement of them that we've seen thus far. They're in places where they wouldn't have normally otherwise been if they were objects of reverence. The one in the road, the one in the very first episode that's in the background in a blink and you'll miss it shot. It's in netting. And for me, the way I see it is that they've either gone inert because they've accomplished their mission, or they've died and they've left this behind as like an empty shell. That kind of thing. That way you could also then see like the one in the temple as just being a coincidence. It's there and then it's just done.
Yeah.
That's my feeling, but I don't know if I'm 90.
There was a nuke in the temple. What are you doing, Father? Why do you have a nuclear warhead? Lord.
Blessed is the... I mean, you know, uranium 239. Is that the new Bible passage?
We're performing the rites over the explosives, yes.
the book of uranium.
Right.
And lo, did Jesus turn the heavy water into heavy wine.
Turn to verse C4. Heavy wine.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
You got that.
Good.
Clicks.
Good.
Clicks.
I liked it.
Okay, next question also from GoGo Atomic Robot is... we've actually just answered this completely by
small fish into a basket of hand grenades. I'm sorry. No. Stop. Shut up. Stop it.
You teach your young girls to shoot a fish. Oh God. But anyway. Go Type Robot's second question, which I think we've answered completely by chance, is now that we know what the statues are of, what was their purpose?
Yeah.
And I think again that my understanding is that it's just it's a case that they were always... I think that I should note though, like, although I've said like I think that they're cuts and they're cuts that have been inert or dead, and when I say dead as in like they've just died of old age or whatever. The one thing I want to note is that one thing that feels apparent from even when you see them at the very start is that they give the sense that Chi and you are always being watched, and that is still true. I would argue.
Yeah,
that still holds true. It just turns out it's not the statues that are watching, but moreover their living compatriots that are doing so. Which the show doesn't actually highlight at any point, like with some sort of site. Like you can totally see like a little insert shot somewhere of this like cut that's like slithering around the background, and it just sees them as they leave on the Kettenkrad up to the next level. But it never does that, and I actually think that's to its benefit. I think that works well for engagement rather than just being there for, hey, they're being followed by a weird white squiggly thing. Like, you know, no, they it's banks for when it's appropriate to bring it in.
Yeah, it doesn't doesn't turn into like the smoke monster from Lost, you know, where like that sort of big mystery takes over, you know, and overshadows other things that they're doing. Yeah, they dole that stuff out like really appropriately in Girls Last Tour.
If we did see the cuts earlier, then we wouldn't need to speculate about what the statues are anymore. And if there's one thing I've learned recently, and this is again thanks to Dan Olsen of Folding Ideas, is that ambiguity challenges us to consider what something might represent and what the meaning is that we take away from it. And this is where all my nonsense stuff about purgatory and all that comes in, which has been turned out to be false. But again, I'm willing to put many pins in this for later, because I'm going to discuss again the idea of why we want to theorize about works and how we should, in theory, go about it and what we should try and get out of it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I don't think that your theory is necessarily false, like it's a slam dunk. You know what I mean? I think that there's still reading that you could do, that this is, again, a purgatory or some kind of dreamlike state. I still think that's viable and valid.
Man, you know what is purgatory? Lockdown. Hey, there's your topical moment.
Hey. But it's about to be
God,
over, right? You're about to
uh,
emerge like a beautiful butterfly from your lockdown cocoon.
oh, um, yes, but
You're gonna be like
well,
the butterfly from fucking Wonder Egg, you know, just all orange and amazing looking. And
and
then you're gonna
also the one
eat
that's attached.
eat a
Yeah,
lizard.
no, that's you know, you could have gone for butterflies from anything else, but it would have to be the one that's attached to a murder child.
Okay, from Cowboy
Oh
Bebop the
God,
movie, you know the
there we go, there
yeah.
we go,
Even though
beautiful,
they're not really
beautiful,
real,
love
they're
it.
drug induced.
Well, yeah, and no, to answer your point, like it is easing up to the point where I'll be able to start seeing people soon, but there's always things that could cause it to fall apart, and I'm just like,
Yeah,
oh, for God's sake. And also, especially when you've got a government run by morons, idiots, brain trusts, you name it. Anyway, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Girls Last Tour. So talk about it we shall. So thank you for your questions there, Go
thank
Like
you.
Robot. We're going to move on to Man of the Hour, Yukinon. Big advocate for the show. And Yukinon's first question is this: do you think the three girls we saw in the video, that being one of the videos they get from the Nuclear Submarines
Yeah.
Archive,
Yeah.
who have been designing self-producing machines, were indirectly responsible for the fall of civilization as we know it?
And their camera
Uh,
as a Chromecast function. Who knew?
it really does. I mean, yeah. That whole scene, by the way, has a lot to take from it. But we'll address. I want to address the point specifically. So for context, like this whole scene is like a montage of various videos of scenes from before the end of the world. Some of which is very much of the actual war itself, either the prelude to it with people arguing what looks like the UN or a close analog thereof.
Mhm.
World leaders scrapping with each other, like saying, "I don't like your tone," and all this,
Right.
calling
Yes.
each other poopy heads or whatever. And then there's of course the actual full-blown war stuff where, for example, we see a line of mechs lasering the area in front of them. By the way, that mech, of course, is established in the episode before this, and we'll be talking about that soon enough. But then there are also scenes of just human life, and particularly a recurring scene of three girls of Chi and Yu's age who are working in, or sorry, being taught how to build robots. And they're being taught to build robots that work very much like the ones we get introduced to in episode 9 and 10. So, like the little spidery things, like little dangly legs. And they're being taught like how to build them in a way that they can self-replicate. So here's the thing, right? I'm going to put concepts out there, an idea, which is that technology is inherently amoral. And you might say to yourself, like, well, what do you mean by that, Shads? And I'll demonstrate it. I will demonstrate it with a visual aid, which goes like this. This is my mobile phone. So, what can I do with this mobile phone? I can do things like message people that I'm friends with, or if I felt so inclined, I could find a celebrity on the internet and send them her, abusive messages if I felt so inclined. So this phone, like, in of itself does not do any of those things. It is how I direct it. It is what I do with it that ultimately decides if it is morally used or not. So them building those robots is not inherently a bad thing. It's not them contributing to the downfall of mankind. The way in which those robots are executed or created or adopted for, like immoral use is what's important, is what humanity chooses to do with its technology that is the key. And indeed, you can see that in the earlier episode as well. We meet the aquarium steward robot, this little dog-like one, and then there's of course the giant like quadruped, recycling robot. They are diametrically opposed. One is about conservation, the other is about destruction. But what gave them those commands? They didn't come up with themselves. They don't have their own free will as such. They were programmed to those things. So, in my opinion, no, they are not responsible for contributing to the downfall of humanity. They are rather either they're creating or their own version of technology that already existed and doing so in a way that is not like the robots we've seen elsewhere that are used for war, or maybe they're the pioneers of it. You know, maybe they developed it really early and then it got adapted for military use. But whatever way you want to slice it, they're either coming before or after that technology was adopted uh, for the purposes of warfare. And they certainly weren't the ones making those decisions, I would assume. So, no, I think that technology is inherently amoral. It is what you do with it that is important. And therefore, my opinion is that they're not to blame whatsoever. Anyway, Doc is just currently ordering himself, I think, possibly a pizza, maybe a Popeyes. I'm not sure. Feel free to type in chat if you're hearing me now what you think he might be ordering on the phone. I'd make it a poll if I could, but unfortunately, I don't have access to that feature on YouTube. Oh, man. So, Doc, did you get your pepperoni pizza large or extra large there? I couldn't tell.
Papa sized it. Boom.
Oh my god. Well, I'll restate the question for your benefit and just very quickly give my point again, which was the three girls we saw in that video. Do you think that they are indirectly responsible for the fall of civilization as we know it because they were designing self-producing machines? And my answer basically boiled down to three words, which is technology is amoral. But rather, it's how you use it that's important.
So, what? Yeah, why? Why do we think that they're culpable?
Because they could potentially have contributed to the design or conception of the machine tags. It's the same kind of machine that we see, like the aquarium one, and also the other larger recycling one. But generally speaking, they're building robot technology that at some point, either before they built it or after they built it, has been adopted for warfare.
Yeah, I didn't know that if they built it or if they were just like some kind of something that I need to watch again for whatever reason. Like it was a lot happening there that I didn't fully grasp when I was watching it. But like, you know, I thought they might have just been some fan club, you know. But they were like designing the war machines. Is that the idea?
No, not the war machines, but they were designing machines that worked on the same self-replicating technology.
Okay, so I see. So like, then that tech was taken by evil governments and then applied to weapons of war and then
Tesla.
used to right and then used. I see. So they're responsible or whatever. Yeah. No. I mean, I think that I side with you. I mean, you know, they have that scene in the big God Warrior robot where Yuri wants to get angry at the robot. It's like, you know, fuck you, robot. Look what you did. And she's actually like, nope, it's not the robot's fault. It's humans. Humans use the tech. Humans pulled the trigger.
That was Yu's own wow cool robot moment.
Yeah.
Literally.
I know, it totally was. And yeah, she was like, you know, that the tech did not do this on its own. You know, tech has to be applied by people, and this is what you've done. You have destroyed the city block or whatever it is she leveled, and I think, yeah, I would say also that like they are not culpable in any really meaningful way. I mean, if that's the case, like, then I mean, God knows whatever each one of us is culpable for. If we are responsible for not just like the direct actions we're taking, but like all the ripple effects, like not just the people affected by our actions, but then how they affect people and how those people affect people, like then we're all fucked. There's no innocent person on the planet.
I will expand on my point. So just point out that this gives me a chance to also reference my favorite film of all time, the one I bring up every now and again is an unsung thematic masterpiece, which is T2, Terminator 2, because there is of course Miles Dyson in that film, the creator of Skynet, and he's a regular guy. He's a nice guy. He's a family man. His biggest crime is basically doesn't pay enough attention to his kids, which doesn't immediately make him a genocidal maniac. He's not like what you expect from films out here. Would be like, I'm building the military robot. But there's a conversation happens after the Terminator. Arnie, reveals his Terminator nature to them, where, how could we have known? And Sarah Connor responds, from the perspective of a mother, you don't know what it's like to feel a life growing inside you, those lines. And the implication of all of that is basically this. And I think this is why, while I do not think the girls are responsible because they are only being educated this way, this lesson still applies. And believe it or not, I want you to keep this all primed in your head for when we get back to around talking about Wonder Egg priority, because you can see where I'm going with this. If you've watched the most recent episode, which is
I have not.
When you create life, and that life can be regular conception, or it can be, as it is here with, the robots, or if my theory holds true with the cuts, you have to consider the implications of bringing that life into the world.
Mm-hmm.
You have to consider what it will grow into, what it will ultimately, choose to do to the world as a result.
Okay, but let me stop you there and ask, where's the line? How long must you consider, or must you consider everything? Like, if someone really does sit down and consider this shit, but they don't foresee some really fringe, awful outcome, then are you still going to hold them accountable? And that's something you and I will never know. No sort of there's no empirical way to quantify that, to find that kind of culpability. So, I don't know. Obviously you should do that when you're having a baby or something like that. But we're talking about making a machine. And that's why I would say that, I don't know, let's take Mark Zuckerberg and the people that made Facebook. So it's been used for some real heinous shit. Right?
I have an answer for that, and the answer to it is to at least try.
Yeah, totally. Yep.
To go back to Terminator 2, Miles Dyson, his whole thing with conceiving of Skynet is that he never stopped to do the actual acts of considering the implications of creating AI.
Jurassic
That's the
Park.
distinction. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We keep going back to stuff because all these sci-fi films and all this sci-fi media has the same core lesson, which is you have to at least consider.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you that you can't account for all eventualities, but at least try, for God's sake.
Totally.
And this is the reason why I said that I still don't quite find them culpable, because they're doing so in an educational setting.
Mm-hmm.
So the burden of consideration would fall on their educators, I would argue.
They're also children, which does make a difference.
Also true.
So,
but yeah, I feel like that's important to bring up, that even though I ultimately don't find them culpable at all, really, it is still a lesson worth remembering when you create life, that you have to at least consider the implications of doing so, rather than just, whatever, we'll do it. I mean, I can certainly think of two idiotic tech bro mannequins who didn't take that lesson on board. You'll know about that soon enough.
Right. Oh, the mannequins. Indeed. Which brings me back around to Zuck. And I was going to say, so like I said, we all know Facebook's been used for some heinous shit. And there's a point in time when he and the other people that made it first learn about that. And at that point, we have no idea if they, like you said, had taken the requisite time and effort to really be good scientists, right? In the way that I would consider being good ethical scientists, or engineers or whatever, technologists. So we don't know if they thought about it, but then we can judge, I think, how they respond to it, and have continued to respond.
Hell yes.
Their behavior, and as it continues to be used for more and more terrible shit, and they continue to either turn a blind eye to it or amplify its ability to do shitty things. At that point, we can go yes, you're clearly being a motherfucker about. But But yeah, I mean, so back to the original question. I think they're kids, first of all. Like you said, it's in an educational setting. And this is a like, there's multiple degrees of separation between their creation of a core technology, a piece of technology, the self-replicator, and then the giant war machines that incorporate that self-replicator. So yeah, I don't really see any major like moral culpability going on there.
But we should also acknowledge, just as a flip side of it, that them creating that robot, like we even see an example of it in this block of episodes, the one that tends to the aquarium. There is benefit to be found here. It's that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we just have to be very careful about what we do with it. And I'm glad that the show at least was willing to say, hey, this exact same kind of robot, even aesthetically, you know, can serve a purpose of cultivation and conservation. It's not just all about the warfare, you know? It's not just all cool robot.
Right. Do you look like a little doggy
Cool
to you?
aquarium robot.
I thought he looked like a cute little doggy. Like a
He
robot
actually
dog.
did, yes.
Because he tilted the cassette player head in a certain way that was an animal type shape. It looked like a snout. Like, it's a robo dog.
Absolutely. Next question then. Having finished the show, which aspects of the series stood out to you the most / exceeded your expectations? Woo. Okay. Here's my first response to this. And this basically is on my perception alone. I thought that what Girls Last Tour was going to be a series of disconnected vignettes of various situations they find themselves in, which would have been okay, but there would have been no thematic through line. I thought it was just going to be more like a, you know, this is the issue of the week that goes in the manga, and here's the place they find themselves in. It's a new and unusual situation, but otherwise it's very serialized in nature, which I mean TV serialized. Like the episode, like one episode or one arc does not necessarily go on to the other. But I was pleasantly. I love it when my own expectations are proven wrong like this and exceeded, because not only did we get that, and I think that it makes the show very palpable. Like, because I think it makes the show very digestible and very enjoyable in a way, like, you know, where they don't labor too long on any given situation. Because I think if that was the case, it might get a bit dry or feel like a bit of slowly paced. But no, it keeps moving from one story. You get like 3 per episode, which is very good in itself. But on top of that, the show is incredibly consistent about its, again, it seems of, as I see it, of hope from hopelessness, the two sides of humanity, which is, you know, violence versus creation empathy. And also, like, you know, what we would choose to do if we were indeed fading out as a species. Do we want to, you know, go out in such a way as where we're scrabbling over the last bits of food, we're killing each other wholesale because we can? Or, you know, do we have our little moments, the little things that we do that, you know, bring life to the world? You know, music, for example, shared experiences like the scene where they got drunk, for example, in one of the previous episodes. Yeah. Like, how as a species would we want to fade out if we had to fade out? Oh, and by the way, when I say fade out, and if we had to, I should be clear on this. Like, we as a species will cease to be in the end. You
Stop.
know? On a long enough time scale, that's going to happen. And indeed, like, you know, there are some scientists and some sci-fi authors who think that we should really, as a species, be working on long-term planning. Good luck with that in this current geopolitical sphere that we live in.
We're bad at that.
But it is a fact of you know, of who we are. Stephen Baxter, the novelist I've referenced a number of times, he wrote a trilogy of books covering the very idea of, you know, what would happen if humanity were to like reach the end of its, like, you know, runtime, so to speak, and in the way in which we've gone. And one of those was called, I think it was Time. And the idea at the end of Time is that basically humanity lived until the very end of the heat death of the universe, but they never encountered any other alien life at all. Not a single shred of it. Hermes paradox be damned, there's none of it. And so what they actually did was that they, through some sort of scientific hoodoo, basically allowed their timeline to end, but created many other timelines in which possibilities of that happening came about. And that's how they wanted to be remembered, that they weren't happy with the fact they never met another sentient species. And so they chose to leave a mark on the fate of all reality by allowing other timelines to come into existence that could ferment that possibility.
That sounds fucking cool. I really like that.
It's a very good novel. The others are not quite as, in that trilogy, are not quite as good, but it's at least asking the question of what happens when we get to the end of time as we know it. How do we want to go out? Like, in theory, in that story, Stephen Baxter's humanity could have been like, nah, we're done. We had a good run, whatever. But they wanted to create new existences, which they do. And so, for me, like, I'm resoundingly impressed by this show's consistency, its clarity of vision, like what it wants to accomplish. And also, one other thing that I'll note, which I think is something that you can have spoken about in our Patreon chat, in our Discord chat, is that this, I already knew going into it, though, was going to be one where the show will end, but the manga will continue the events afterwards. And you always run into a problem from an adaptational perspective of how do we make that work where the show itself is satisfying to watch, even if it doesn't complete the arc, the entire arc is in the manga. And I don't think you could have really done it better than this, where they end in such a way where they conclude on a sense of strong finality, but the girls continue on with their heads held high to the next level. Like, they have been told under no certain circumstances that the Earth is going to burn out. It will go cold soonish. That the cuts have made that clear. But they, will continue on anyway. They'll keep journeying and they'll keep making these memories, having these encounters, these little moments that we've seen throughout the show's run. And that's so astonishingly bittersweet, but it's also a perfect way to end this adaptation, because if you want to go get the manga, you can do, but it's a perfect conclusion to their journey where they've realized in some sense that, hey, it is all futile, but it's still worth doing. And that's a really powerful message to... I mean, that's arguably also life itself. Like, I'll die someday, so I could argue, well, what the fuck's the point then? But that doesn't mean we don't live every single moment that we can do,
Yeah, I guess it goes back to, like, what's your definition of futile? Which I have a lot to talk about at some point. I don't know if it's quite relevant in this question here, but I guess it is relevant in that, like... So, I'll talk about what I did expect for the show, and that was... really what, like, the core thematics ended up being about. Like, I'd heard enough about the show and kind of seen a few visuals here and there to understand the tone it would be kind of going for and the pace at which it would tell its story and what the messaging would ultimately be. And I think it stuck by that while adding more layers to it than I would have thought. But, like, I think what I didn't expect was that I would care about, like, for lack of a better word, the lore to, like, the universe that they find themselves in, and, like, how things got to be the way they were, and what different things mean, and why architecture is one way, and why aren't there any people, and what are these statues, like all this sort of stuff. That I actually really, really quite liked, and I thought added a lot to it. And another thing that I was really, really impressed by that I just totally didn't expect was, like, the settings. Some of the settings in the show, like when the camera will, step far back so you can kind of take in everything, are just amazing. And they're these, like, just kind of artificial environments. Like, nothing about them is natural, but, like, the forest of windmills in the penultimate episode. Incredible. Like, really, really amazing. The visuals of when they use the big robot to level the city, and you see, like, fire streaking across the whole horizon. There's just a line of fire. It might as well be like the equator going across the whole Earth for what
the
they can see.
apocalypse starting up again.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's dread inducing, and, like, and then there's, like, a couple scenes, and they don't call this a forest, but it's one of the early episodes. It's either episode 9 or 10. I think it's episode 10 where they're I think on their way to the train, and they like pass under all these rows of sleeping robots, and it's like a forest of big robot trees, and it's really dark, and just it seems kind of terrifying. I mean, that shit was just so cool. And just some of the machinery they encounter in this last block of episodes, which I thought was paced significantly better. And again, maybe it's just me. It's a totally subjective thing, but like I did not feel the same kind of difficulties in my viewing experience with this set of episodes. But anyway, like there's some point that they like what episode is it? I'm trying to see. I don't.
The aquarium?
No,
Is it the train?
it's after the aquarium. It's not episode 9, but I think it's right before they come to the Windford. They find this weird fucking statue that is a bunch of gears and then things that look like laptops, but they're like mirrors. That thing scared the shit out of me. Like, there's something really, really scary and unsettling about a world full of machinery that is just operating, but with no people in it. Yeah. Like, to me, that's just like incredibly lonely. Like, how just, and I mean, in a way, I mean, that's sort of like, what's the difference between that and the way the universe normally is? Because, you know, it's like just happening, but there's something about it being this man-made machinery without the people. You know what I mean? Just like the trains are still running, the gears are still going.
It gives the impression that everywhere's haunted.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, I say that, and I think there's actually more truth to it than you might think. And I'm not talking in the literal sense that ghosts are running the machines, but you have to remember that all of this was set in place. Mm-hmm. All of the machinery in there was set in motion by human hands in human intent. So even though the humans are gone, their will, the reason they got all these things going, lives on. And that's why we have the conflicts in episode 9 between the tiny dog machine and the giant, like, quadrupedal, like, dismantling machine, where long after their utility is needed, I mean, let's be honest here. Okay, the dog robot has more right to be doing what it's doing because there is still one fish left, just the one, but still one.
Mm-hmm.
But why on earth is that other robot recycling resources for a master race that no longer really exists? But it continues on.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't recognize the fact that the world has ended. And that's why I think this is also where we get discussions of, like, the city is alive and all that,
Mm-hmm.
Even though humanity has come to an end, what the mark we've left on the world lingers on and is still actively changing it and interacting. And that's why I use the word haunted, not because there are literal ghosts, but because, our will has been left behind in some sense or another.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great word. I mean, that's exactly what I felt. And, thinking about, like, what the robot, like, the dismantler robot, versus, I think it's interesting to think about, like, these robots, especially that one, contrasted with Chi and Yu, because I think Chi and Yu, certainly by the end of this, they understand that there's no ultimate goal, there's no prize at the end of the rainbow, that there's that the world is depopulated, they're the only people left. Like, as far as, like, the meaning to their lives and meaning and structure to the world, there's nothing inherent. That kind of meaning is not inherent. There's no value imbued into it from any kind of outside force. It's just all cold and neutral. And to make something out of their lives, like, that's up to them. They have to make it meaningful. They have to construct that. Whereas, like, the robots are almost like these people that haven't realized they haven't realized that their world has been abandoned. that their creators are gone. Like, they basically, I mean, not to be super fucking reductive about it, they haven't realized that there is no God, like that God is dead, that the, they're still operating under these, like, almost like divinely given mandates by their creators. You know what I mean? Like, here's what I'm supposed to be doing. Why am I supposed to be doing it? That's what my creator wants me to do. It's a good thing. Like, regardless of what I think, like, this is what needs to happen. And I think, like, that's, you could say, if you were so inclined, if you were an absurdist or existentialist or whatever, like, you'd be like, well, that's how people live. That's how a lot of people live in our world, who are, like, laboring under different ideologies that do believe that there's something beyond us that gives life in the world structure and inherent meaning. And these robots are like that. And when you look at them from that perspective, it's just, like, kind of sad, I guess. Like, not to be a fucking condescending about it, but, like, I think in a show like this, that, like, I think there's a lot of existentialist themes and a lot of absurdist philosophy, like, at the heart of it. I think it's fair to, like, bring that stuff in and apply it to the robots, because they are living, like, everything is as it was, but their creators don't exist. Whatever goal that they were programmed to meet, that goal is no more. It doesn't matter. There's nothing in their world that makes what they're doing meaningful anymore.
Yeah,
but they can't
exactly
decide to do something different.
Yep. And then indeed, when you said, like, about lack of meaning, like, it's only when Chi and Yu gets to the aquarium that robot's, like, duty in keeping that fish fed reaps dividends, because the fish itself is then observed, and its presence is like, yeah. So no, you're 100% right. But yeah, basically, I thought I was gonna basically, what does that mean? What I expected, what I got. What I expected was, kooky observational, sitcom stuff from a moment-to-moment basis.
Oh no!
And
Did
that
you
was
really?
it. And I got that. I got that to some extent. But what I also got was a meaningful look at what it would be like to be two people in the days in which humanity's candle was just burning out, and what they choose to do with that remaining time, and how they choose to make it meaningful. And whether or not even the act of giving it meaning is the right thing to do or not. Do we fall into nihilism of, well, we're fucked, whatever, fine, I don't give a shit? Right. Or do we continue to give meaning to the world, to our lives, even when there is literally no hope of ever recovering? And I think that's an incredibly powerful statement that this show makes. And it's the one thing I didn't expect, but it's the one thing I'm really, really glad it gave us.
Yeah, I agree. And I will echo what you said in different words later. I'll give it some time.
That's fine. Okay, so that's all the questions from Yukon. But we have one more from Rackham Extreme as patron question.
Extreme.
Extreme.
Oh yeah. This is extreme.
I mean, we need to have lightning cracking the sky whenever we say that.
Yes.
So Rackham says, when the adult cut tells the girls they are the last they have seen left alive, do you take that to mean the other people they have met have since passed on? And that presumably refers to Ishii and Kanazawa. I don't think so, and I think there's one reason I can give for this, which is the cuts, as I understand it, have been gradually ascending up through the levels. They started at the bottom, have been working their way up. But both Kanazawa and Ishii's fate has been that they started up high and then were cast down low. Kanazawa, of course, well, in fact, no, he didn't. He lost his match, but he stayed. He didn't go any further. He kept mapping that level. Whereas Ishii, she actually ended up having to parachute all the way down to the bottom. So I think that my explanation is just that they simply didn't cross paths. It's a big place. It's not impossible, I would argue.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and we saw, like, some of the cut were deactivated in zones where those other people were hanging out, so they just might not have been active there.
Yeah.
What I want to know is, like, what happened to Grandpa and all of them, and, like, the memories that we saw at the very beginning, what made us think, okay, these young girls have died and this is purgatory, like they're getting flashbacks of their death. They don't talk about them, and they don't seem to be cognizant of them. I mean, they remember grandpa, but like it seems like they kind of, were like pushed out in a boat, metaphorically speaking. And then in the background you hear like gunfire and like, oh, like so like what the fuck? I mean, what happened to them? I really want to know. I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter like in terms of like what the story's trying to say, but I still want to know if they are really the last people left alive. Or if there's not some like big community somewhere that they came from.
I think the intent, as I see it, though, is that regardless of whether or not those people are literally alive,
and who are they
everything that we've seen
fighting? Who's like fighting a war with guns at this point? When it's like, yeah, there's 17 people left. Let's throw down.
Yeah, this M1 Garand clearly, or whatever is meant to be the analog of it, is clearly capable of going toe to toe with a giant robot with a cycloptic death laser. Yeah, I can see that happening.
Yeah.
That's like saying you're going to pit your average, Battlefield, World War One character versus a Gundam. I mean, maybe you can do it if you're really, really good. If you go full Dark Souls on it,
right?
But that thing's just going to step on you, and it's going to start like wiping its foot on the floor to smear you off. I'm taking on an angle. Shit! I stood on someone again, Dad. I need to wipe the robot's foot. Will you give me a moment? He's like, yeah, go on. I'll take a smoke break. That kind of thing.
We don't have a rag. Just like rub it out in the snow.
Yeah.
Yuki says the answer's in the manga.
Well, there we go then. But I will just say this as well with respect to if they're alive or not, which is, I think one of the key messages of the show as well is that people like. And this is also, I think, so we can apply to our own lives. Like, in terms of literally being dead, could very well be. But the key thing to note is that they remain alive inside of us if we remember them.
Sure.
And that ties everything together in terms of the stuff we see in the submarine with all of the photographs they've been taking. Chi's journal, like her taking notes as she's gone along, recording everything, like. And even just having like the dreams and the flashbacks and the memories of Grandpa, like we never meet him. He could well be dead. But I think the point is more that even if that is true, he still lives on in them. He still guides them. He still offers his example. Yeah. And that's true for us in real life. Like when we have a family member who passes on, like they might physically be gone, but we still have our memories of them. We still have the examples they left us to either live by or to conversely, if this is unfortunately the case, to reject.
If there was some malevolent force, like, why did it not pursue you and Chi? Like, they're just two kids in a Kettenkrad. You think they could, if there's like a group with guns that's trying to, claim territory or like kill the community that their grandpa is a part of, it just is like it's just very like left over. But the answer is in the manga, and this is not a thing that, by the way, I am like dinging the show for. I'm not taking points off for this. I just really,
how dare you not say this?
I just really want to know. I'm super curious. And you're totally right. I mean, this is what I thought, Go-Go, that like a grandpa dies, but like I don't know. There's just something about like the way that I read it, to where like the girls like didn't really seem like that they realized their grandpa's dead. I don't know. But we'll like, this is all things that could be solved with us picking up a book. So,
imagine that, picking up a book.
Yeah.
My God, what is this antiquated technology you speak of?
Oh. Boy.
Anyway, do you have anything else to add to that, Doc?
What was the question again? This is the Rackham question.
This was the Rackham question, and it was: do you think that other people have passed on? The people that we met before, Ishii and Kanazawa. Right.
No, I mean, I almost don't think it matters, like, because they have met. And well, I don't know. I mean, maybe it does matter. No, I don't think so, because I think the idea of like them meeting the girls was that they needed to learn that like the pre-prescribed goals, you know, that they had inherited, or that they've been given, or that they thought, this is what I should be doing, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Those could all blow up, but that doesn't mean your life is over. You know, being faced with a structureless world and existence is not like the end of value to your life. You know, it's at that point, like, you to use a phrase that is often employed shittily in politics, but I think is used in philosophy to mean what I'm trying to say. You have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, existentially speaking, right? And like get about the business of giving your life new meaning, your own value. And it, like, you know, it sounds cheap maybe to some people who are like, that can't compare with like the value that, like, you know, the religion might give to things or whatever. But like, if the whole premise of what you're saying is like all that stuff is not real, like there is no higher level of value, there is only this, like, then that is actually very important, that kind of subjective value you can assign to things, because it's the only value that there is in the universe. And so like it is really, really important. And yeah, so I guess now we're going to take a short break before
we'll
we
return after the break to go on to our talk points. And just before we go, thank you very much to our patrons for chipping in with your comments. Thank you especially again to Yukon for being an advocate of the show, and also for his own questions as well. Don't adjust your internet browsers or whatever devices you may be using to watch this particular live stream. We'll be back in just a moment.
Just like
Hello, everyone. We're back. Thank you very much for waiting. We're now going to get straight into our talking points about Girls' Last Tour episodes 9 through 12. And I'm going to go first. I'm going to seize the moment. I'm going to exercise my, privilege here as the one running the podcast this week in terms of leading the discussion to get it out there first. And I want to talk about how this show made me realize that I need to be more careful with like fan theorizing and what fan theorizing even means and what we do with it. So, here's the thing, right? I came up with a lot of theories about this show about like, hey, maybe, Chi's a god. Like, there's an idea for you. Or what if it turns out, it's all about purgatory and all this stuff, But here's the thing. I don't necessarily think that theorizing about what a show like happens in a show in terms of like literally the state of characters or the world is necessarily inherently a bad thing. Like, go back to my idea: is Chi a god or not? Like, asking that question is not inherently a bad thing, but the problem is you've got to be careful when you do stuff like this because I fear you might miss the forest for the trees, so to speak. And so the thing I would point to, and I just because this frames the entire way in which you should approach Girls' Last Tour as a work, is this, right? Just by its concept alone of two young girls traveling a post-apocalyptic wasteland wearing these army outfits, which again, maybe they're soldiers, maybe they're not, but as I've said previously, it doesn't really matter. They are already in a situation in which we would never want children to be in. Whatever your ultimate feeling on war and warfare, whether you feel it's fuck it, whatever, will bomb the shit out of them, or if you're like me and you think to yourself, no, war is not the answer in almost any circumstance unless it is an unambiguous like threat to our continued existence and survival. Whatever part of the spectrum you land on, I think it's not unreasonable for me to say like child soldiers, no thanks. And so just by the premise alone, you're already being confronted with the implications of what's happened in this world to let these characters be the way they are and what the show is already putting across as a moral lesson for you. But you then need to go a step further when you actively engage with the show, and you need to be like, okay, here are these things that happen. Here are these things that I speculate may happen. But you then have to consider the thematic implications of both what you know has happened and what you think might happen. That I think is very, very important here. Because there are still many things that are unanswered by the end of the show. Like, I've given my theory, for example, on where the cuts came from, and I've tried to justify that with a thematic element that would make their existence in the work meaningful. But I still don't know that one way or the other. So all I'm going to say is this, right? And this is something that was inspired by me watching Dan Olsen's video on Annihilation, which is, if you want to fan theorize about work, where you want to say, what do you think actually happened in all this? Like, I would ask and implore that if you do that, try and derive some more meaning from it rather than just saying what you think might have happened. Question why it happens. Question what it means in terms of the work itself. And this could be applied to anything. It doesn't have to be like a thought-provoking work like this. It could be something that's just a popcorn film. And maybe that's just for the, maybe it turns out, oh, actually there was no intent behind this because the creators were hacks, like that in itself can be fun to think about, but also can be revealing about how you interpret media. And so, yeah, that's the thing I've also taken away from watching this show is that it is deliberately ambiguous about a lot of things, but ambiguity is designed to challenge you to think about it. So when you get to something that's ambiguous, don't try and speculate solely in terms of what you think has actually literally happened in the work, but consider the meaning behind that ambiguity and what would the meaning be if you then settled on a course of what this might mean. This is why I offered both those explanations about the cuts earlier. I stepped up because I'm being a smart ass, basically, which is, whether you believe them to be a biological weapon that grew out of control to show that humanity's own war, like predilection to war, will burn itself out, or if you believe them to be a divine interventionary force, be it alien or actually angel, that, comes in and says, hey, we've had enough of your shit, cut it out, and therefore proving that war cannot be stopped without outside intervention. That's still at least two meaningful interpretations you can take from it, as opposed to, well, actually, I just thought they were growing in the vat. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because it will just make your interpretation of media much more enriching.
Right. Yeah. You're saying like you're warning people because you want them to have this be an edifying activity. Not that it's necessarily harmful to speculate otherwise, but just you'll get more out of it if you do it.
100%,
the way that you're talking
100%.
about.
And I am guilty of having done this many times before, indeed with this very show. Because previously I did justify why I thought, or at least I don't recall justifying in great detail why I thought purgatory was important. As a thematic element, because that would make it spiritual, and then why is it spiritual, so and so forth. But now, now that's been pointed out to me, I felt it was worth pointing out in my discussion here, which is, yeah, definitely try and engage with the work in a sense of, if this were the way things played out, this ambiguous thing, how does that tie into the rest of the work, basically?
Well, in your defense, we hadn't seen the rest of the work. I think when you're doing a watch along or episodic analysis, I think you're excused to some degree for coming up with these holistic theories because you haven't really seen what everything everything that the show has to say. Now, certainly, I think I'm totally with you in terms of analyzing complete work that you've seen, that there's more and less beneficial ways to do it, Not that there's anything wrong with just, fucking around and making some shit up about it, but
unless you're doing one of those 7 things you might have missed videos. People who make those are grifters and con men, and I hate them for it. I mean, recently I saw an article
in a movie
around,
or whatever.
Well, I mean, recently I saw an article floating around where someone was trying to explain why Cypher betrayed Morpheus in The Matrix, ignoring the fact that there is a full 3 to 4 minute scene where he sits down explaining to Agent Smith and us, the audience, as a result, why he's doing it. And at this point, I'm just like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be literally. This is why also I've tried to move the podcast away from going through plot recitations if all possible, because I don't want to be here to explain to you what literally happens. I want to try and get more into the weeds of why it happens, in terms of maybe character motivation, but also themes like creator or authorial intent, that kind of thing. That's the most enriching and, as you rightly put it, edifying element of critiquing, and it's why I'm here. And this show helped me remind me of that, which I think is great. So I just wanted to point that out as one of the things I'm going to remember this show for, that it came at the right time, was hey, this is a thing that reminds me of why I'm doing this and what I'm here to do it for, and what I ultimately also don't want to be doing, which is, hey, here's this thing that you might have missed in the background. This would be imagine if we did a podcast where we talked solely about, I spied all where the statues were, and we never said what the statues might mean.
That would be
garbage. It'd be
it would be not good. It would be for a different audience than you and me.
I'm not interested. I'm not interested in speaking to the audience, to be quite honest.
Well, yeah, it certainly is not why I started a podcast, or why I came to works like Girls Last Tour, or even anime in general. So, yeah, well, thank you for sharing. That's a great point, and I'm in agreement. Though, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with doing the other thing, but I just think you are just missing out on so much.
I think that the problem with doing it the other way, though, is if it happens on a wind-up scale, then it just means that there's going to be more simplification in media, because people don't want deep. I always find myself questioning, why do we not see works that are more meaningful, or more have greater depths to plumb, be more popular? And it's not because people are literally stupid. I don't believe in that kind of anti-intellectual, but rather I think that people are not necessarily equipped with the tools to get the most out of the films that they want. Which is also why I've reflected on stuff people say, for example, in my country, media studies, why the fuck did you do that? And the truth of it is that people seem to view education in a way where it's does it get you a job, and does it get you a job that pays well? And
oh my God,
don't get me wrong, I'm not going to get onto this subject too much, because I know Doc's got strong feelings on this, but I'm going to point out that there is a grain of truth to the fact that yes, you do want to get a good job, not necessarily because that's the best thing to do in general, because capitalism, all this stuff that we could talk about for hours. But one thing that education does not necessarily do, and it didn't do for me, and I only learned most of the stuff after starting the podcast, is it didn't teach me how to get the most out of the media I consumed. And that's why I'm trying to get this across here, which is that if there are less and less people as time goes by making, getting interested, buying, purchasing complicated media like Girls Last Tour, then there's going to be less of it going forward.
I mean, I hear you. I also just don't want to like regulate the way people engage with media. Like, if they just want to talk about ships, I'm good with it. You know what I mean?
Oh,
If they
everyone's
just want
talking about ships right now.
to...
Oh, different kind of ship, though, to be fair.
Yeah,
Hey!
hey.
Sorry.
I mean, yeah. So
Shouts to
like,
the Evergreen. That was a drift and a half.
God, um, right, the evergreen. Yeah, no, I like if people want to do like write a blog about like where all the statues are, and like try to make a map of the world of Girls Last Tour without engaging in the philosophy. Again, I think it's fine, and I think like I also think that could end up helping the kind of criticism that we want to do. It could, we could be more informed
Mm-hmm.
about certain aspects of the work we might be neglecting that could shed light on thematic. So I mean, I don't want to. I like both, and I think that there's room for both. Now I think the whole like what gets made is like just this whole other different complicated universe of questions. But as far as like especially since we're not professionals, we're just like fans doing this. Like I'm all for.
I'm all amateur hour over here.
Yeah,
Don't you worry.
yeah. I don't want to. Yeah, I am good with other people doing what they want to do, and so we can do what we want to do. So, and we can all help each other ultimately, I think.
Yeah, I do agree. To be fair, I think what I should clarify is that I think for me, like, I would rather that people have the ability to do that kind of critiquing where they do get into the weeds and the depths of thematic analysis, metaphor, and such, rather than they could, but they can't.
Right.
That I think is the distinction for me.
Right.
And my plea is not to say like you must do this, but rather I would like you to have the ability to do this, and then the choice of whether you do so or not, as opposed to that door forever being closed to you because you're not, well, not even forever, but you know what I mean, just being closed to in general because you don't have the frameworks necessary to engage with material like this. And this isn't, by the way, this isn't me bigging myself because the shit I miss all the fucking time in shows,
God.
no doubt,
Me
which
too.
equally applies to this one. But I at least want to try and engage with it because I've at least learned over time like how I can try to do that, and I would just. And to me, like that's made my life better for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my lesson basically, which is with Girls Last Tour. If you want to just watch and enjoy, like the skits and all that, that's fine. But if you've got the ability to do so, maybe look a little deeper. You'll find some interesting stuff there. That'll make you get more out of it. You get more bang for your buck.
Let's dig a little deeper. No, is that what the Princess and the Frog? Yeah. I mean, I think there's certain like plenty of individual situations that you could point to. Be like, like if only you, critic, like could had the ability
Watch
to
the
engage
movie.
with it on a different
like
on a
with
different
Cypher,
level.
like with Cypher portraying Morpheus.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I totally hear where you're coming from, and I think the responsibility is also on us to some degree to make. Not that what we do is the most highfalutin thing in the world. In fact, it's not primarily because like I want the kind of thing that the platonic ideal of what we're aiming for to be like more accessible and like not intimidating to people, because I think that might be part of why people don't engage with work in a super like critical, literary, analytical ways, because like it's so intimidating, and then everything will lose all meaning because everything becomes completely subjective and totally open to every interpretation, and that's just not the case. So
I mean, for my part, I just chat shit and drink beer on this podcast. It's great. So there we go.
Yeah, there you
You
go.
heard it. You heard it here first.
Okay.
Anyway, over to you, Doc. What's your plot point?
Well, there's a few things. I'm trying to decide what to talk about, and I guess like so I guess the thing I could talk about is how Girls Last Tour is I I don't know. I may have talked about this referring to another anime, but I think I'm gonna talk about it again here because it applies. I think that it is a very postmodern anime in terms of where its head is at. And I say that not necessarily because it's like something that Michel Foucault would have written and been all about or whatever, but like one of the kind of core things about postmodernism, it was a strong reaction against what had become what people had come to call modernism, or like enlightenment, European enlightenment values, one of which was that like history and technology were on a sort of unstoppable linear upward trajectory. That there was an unstoppable march of progress, right? That tech and knowledge and learning would, like, mankind would just march ever forward, right? And we would quote unquote evolve and continue to evolve.
It was just the chart just is forever upwards.
Exactly,
There is
just
no
arrow pointing up.
Yeah, there is no backward progress. There is no dips. It is just, we're going to get better perpetually and indefinitely, which is naive to a fault. Oh boy.
Yeah, and I mean, the 20th century and its 2 world wars put a hard fucking stop to that shit. Quick, fast, and in a hurry. But like, there's a dialogue in, I think, episode 9 where the girls and the robot are talking about evolution, and they talk about like evolution is like actually doesn't really solve all the problems. That like basic and that whole by evolution, they're not talking about like biological. I think they're talking about, again, like humanity's like evolution in terms of being like problem solvers and being just better and better, right? But like that you can't evolve your way out of every problem. And that, again, that whole episode is like, again, like this, the two machines working at cross purposes. Like if tech is just this upward trajectory, like then you have like these, I think, something that is a representation of much more than the individual situation, right? You have the two machines that are working against each other, and that are ultimately like, that the one machine in terms of like it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, but like it's going to end in the life of a species, in the existence of a species. And and then you have things like the God Warrior that just sort of prove that, like like we were talking about being ethical technologists, right? That like that and asking these kind of questions of yourself when you are creating, that didn't used to be a thing. Like people used to just think that science was like, I mean, there was almost like a religion about science, like scientism. Like it's going to always and forever save everyone and continue to like just, it's going to be this incredible future and it's going to solve all the world's problems. Like, but because, as this show rightly points out, like human beings are involved, that's just not the case. And human beings have to be involved. And so because of that, like it's going to be for good and for ill. Like I think this episode shows as well, if I'm making any kind of sense here.
No, yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoyed that bit. I really think that thing that happens at the end of episode 9, with the 2 robots and them saving the fish, I mean, it's just so, I just really love it. I think that you could mine a lot thematically out of that situation. So that was the first point I wanted to bring up.
Well, just to follow up what you said there about what happens at the end of the episode, like they still frame it in the sense like of them destroying the larger of the 2 robots as a loss of life. They view it as a thing that's alive. And
yeah, that's it. Oh, we need to talk about that.
Yeah, and the thing is, right, it depends on your definition of sentience and sapience, whether or not you consider that thing to be alive as we would understand it. Like, I mean, this is something that the show itself argues definitions of what it means to be alive or not.
Mhm.
But here's the thing, right? I think the way I read it is that there is a montage of shots where Chi is like considering the like what it means to be alive, like about the city being alive, and this is what I said before about the idea of it being haunted. You
Mhm.
know, again, not in literal sense. And so, with them destroying that robot, that is another thing that has been set in motion by humanity that is brought to a standstill. It stops being animated. You know,
Mhm.
and the reason why I'm using the word animated is because animated has the word anima in it, which has been used as a means of like talking about soul and like
Right.
coming to life and all that. So when they destroy the robot, like you have to, I think, framing it in such a way as where you say like this is bringing another thing of human creation to an end, like in one way or another,
Mm.
is important because I wouldn't call it murder as such. I don't think they're murdering that robot. But what I think they are doing is that they are taking something out of the world that is still active and moving and interacting with the world. Like it's got,
Mm.
it's
Right.
it's partaking in the environment. They're taking this thing out of it, and that is a loss.
Well, don't they say also it can feel like empathy, like because the little doggy robot can clearly feel empathy for
If it
them and
could,
the fish. I think. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
it's actually funny that you said because that's made me think of a implication for that, which also ties in against the idea of what we said before about creating life and the
Mhm.
understanding of. If it could feel empathy, one would argue, well, why doesn't it not? Why does it continue to destroy the aquarium when there's that fish remaining? And my response to that would be maybe it's programming that has been put in place
Mhm.
by humans overrides that, and that ties back
Oh
to
yeah,
everything else
it's like a three laws
because
situation. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
for
it
sure.
ties back to everything else that we create this thing that, if material efficiency, recycling
Mm.
is more important than the preservation of life, and we could then get into all the things like
Yeah.
about fucking capitalism, like you name it. But also get it also goes to show like that this robot was and by association, the smaller one, were never given the latitude to think independently enough to say, hey, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore.
Hmm.
They weren't given true sayings. And then we could talk about, robot slavery. Like, holy shit, there's all sorts of implications from this. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
I really
I
like. Oh, sorry. You go ahead. You finish.
no, sorry, no, after you, after you.
Oh, I was just gonna say. The thing I like the show is generous with its definition of life. I think far too often like we like privilege that and like we're very stingy with it, and how we sort of dole out the status of like living thing, or like the degrees of living things, like oh, you've killed this thing, but it doesn't matter. It's not the same thing as it's not really like taking a life, or it's not the same thing. You're not a murderer
Mm,
or whatever. um but I don't know. I think being generous with your definition of life will. I think that is something that can lead to a lot less suffering, like net suffering in the world, which I'm a
yeah,
fan of. And that, yeah, and I like what you said, that they see the robots as alive because they're moving through the world, they're interacting, and they can feel things. And so like, rather than like subject it to all these rigorous tests and presume not life until rigorous testing is done, like why not, like,
Turing test, basically. Yeah.
yeah, why not
Well,
assume
just
that it's alive and not like
yeah.
needlessly create like this kind of suffering in the world when it appears, if for all appearances sake, that it is in fact a living thing.
Yeah. Well, to tie that together with everything else that happens in the show, picture this, right? Picture that you are in a white void where there is no noise, nothing to look at. It is just devoid of sensation, of interaction, of stimuli. That I would argue constitutes there being no life there. And so here's the thing, right? to use that definition as well, like we talked about the robots, but let's talk about the previous episodes, like the rain episode.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you put together all of those like helmets and cans to make music through rain, like the place comes alive. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and so the basically the definition of life that Girls Last Tour uses is not simply just biological existence. Like, you know, here's a cell culture and that's doing
Right.
things. Like that's not enough for this show. The show, to me, rightly points out that it is about, you know, experience. It is about interacting with the world,
Experience
like
is good.
being stimuli, you name it. You know, audio, visual, whatever you want to call it.
They're experience
and
havers, and they can reflect on that experience, and that's pretty like
and,
I don't know. That's a lot.
yeah, and as long as they continue to have that, they also talk about what it means to be alive. They are alive, and the world is alive around them. You know, it's not a silent landscape where nothing moves, nothing makes any noise. As long as these things keep happening, they are alive and the world is alive. And eventually it will burn out, you know, it'll stop because of what the cuts said.
Mm-hmm.
But while that's happening, there is still life. And that's like, even in all of that's happened, like, you know, with the world having ended, with the implication and if not actual reality that there have been nuclear annihilation. Because after all, nuclear submarine, surely it must have been used.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you extrapolate all the other countries that have used it. Like, even if there's not any plant life, even if there's not any greenery as we see it, or anything like that, as long as they continue to like interact with the world and the world interacts back in some way or another, that's life. That's living. And that's why the destruction of that robot, while I wouldn't call it a death and I wouldn't call it murder, or even homicide or whatever it is, it's still a loss. Because there's one less thing that's interacting with and changing the world as they know it.
Right.
Which Lord knows there are not more coming in to do that at this point.
No. No. Shoot, I had a point I was gonna say, and then it just flew out of my brain. Goddamn. Oh, I remember now. It's really interesting that like they are basically tasked with coming up with this definition on the fly of what it means to be alive in this world where there are presumably only like just a very, very small handful of human beings left. And that they are not like, you know what's alive? Us. And that's it. Isn't the goalposts move in an interesting way because again, they're more generous than that with their defining. So really interesting stuff. All right, what's your next point?
Okay, let's talk about empathy. Let's talk about what it means to eat living animals, because this is where the Promised Neverland comes in. Get ready for this comparison.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so here's the thing, right?
Demon cow.
I need to be upfront with my own credentials here, which is that I eat meat, and I am cognizant of the fact that there are many reasons I should not eat meat, both ethical and practical. I'll, for example, put on the table. I did not mean to use that pun actually in terms of talking about eating meat. Whoops.
Oh my god, I didn't catch it.
I shouldn't say anything. Maybe no one knows. But I mean, something that I learned, for example, even when I was in high school, was the fact that take the amount of pasture that you need to give to cows to graze. Let's say that amount of pasture feeds 10 people. You'll feed many, many more by just actually not growing the crops that feed those cows, but instead growing the crops that feed people.
Right.
Like you replace with soy, for example.
Sure.
The thing that the alt-right think has turned you into like, some sort of wispy woman.
Right.
Even though, Asian countries have been eating it for years. Decades, centuries, Oh boy.
Don't
so tired of that.
Anyway.
But anyway, so that's one of the more practical reasons. And then, of course, we can talk about the ethical reasons of consuming like living animals raised in captivity. And this is, of course, why we get free range versus power. All this sort of stuff. I'm aware of all of it. I still eat meat. That makes me a hypocrite. And you are more than welcome to criticize her. Why am I bringing this up in relevance to Girls' Last Tour? Because I want to talk about episode 9 and what happens in the aquarium, which is specifically that you and Chi, like they find this aquarium where there's a single fish left. It's the one fish that's there.
Mm-hmm.
And you is meaning like, I want to eat it, and this is why we had a scene early in the show where they did indeed eat a fish.
Right.
And here's the thing, right? There's a key distinction to be made in the context of where they are now in episode 9 versus where they were previously, which is, of course, we had an interim scene. And this is why this show's individual vignettes all play into each other in really great ways. Continuity is fantastic. But prior to them finding the bakery, their supplies were more limited. So them eating the fish at that point made sense. But eating it now is just an indulgence. I want to eat fish because why not? And this, to me, like The Promised Neverland, I brought that up because The Promised Neverland, particularly in season 2, but I'm not going to elaborate too much, starts to try and make equivalences between, like, you know, the demons eating humans and how we as humans eat meat, for example. And I'll tell you now, like, beyond everything else that's wrong with season 2 of Promised Neverland, it's such a limp-dicked comparison for many reasons, some of which are digested to The Promised Neverland. It's crap. It's absolute shit.
I was thinking about that during the first season, even that it's like, what if it really leans into this? I was happy with it to be a very obvious kind of background thing to think about, but joke's on me.
I'm so sorry, but
Oh,
I'm not going to tell you what it is because I don't want to waste your time. Like, basically, I'm not going to tell you because I feel like I'm wasting your time when the show's going to do that as well.
It was on a plate.
Anyway. Oh, Jesus. But here's the thing, right? This show, through the juxtaposition of that earlier fish scene with this one here, makes a far greater case for why you should not be indulgent in eating meat than you would than other shows like it's still like The Promised Neverland, where that's like literally the whole setup of the entire show, which is the cultivation of luxury foodstuffs, as in human beings. Like, it's better than that. And it's better than that without even really going into it, but it just points out that, you know, this is, again, ties into the whole idea of empathy, which is that living creatures deserve dignity and deserve, you know, rights. And we shouldn't be just consuming because we fucking feel like it. We could feed everyone on the planet on crops and stuff, you know, like plants, if we wanted to. We don't, but we could. And it would solve a lot of hunger problems. But again, like it just keeps it simple, but it's very, very true that it points out through this juxtaposition that, hey, you know, there are times when it is necessary to eat meat because you are limited on supplies. But when you are well fed, when you're, you know, stable in what you've got to keep you. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting tired. To keep you well fed and all that. You know, when you've got all that stuff set up, like, you don't need to be indulgent. Indulgence can be cruelty. And so I'm glad this show gets to have its cake and eat it, where it says, hey, in this case, it's fine, but in this case, it's not. Like, it presents it as a complex and nuanced issue without ever really addressing it right on. And I thought, that's really neat. I think this is pretty great. Like, even as someone who fully admits his own hypocrisy and will not probably change his behavior, I will at least acknowledge that, hey, this has made a compelling argument for why one shouldn't actually eat meat, you know, when otherwise the situation is that you're well catered for from other foods, you know, things that are more ethical. And this ties into the whole idea of the empathy element that comes in through that entire episode. So yeah, even as a thing it doesn't directly talk about, like, this show like makes an ethical case for not consuming meat, for, like, you know, for becoming vegetarian or even vegan, if you want to call it that.
Right.
And it makes it in a way that is far better than anything else I've seen in anime as of late, and even stuff like Promised Neverland, which purports to directly address that, but in reality absolutely fails to.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. I didn't even think about that being present in there, because, like you said, it doesn't really lean into it in an obnoxious sort of way. So yeah, no, I'm on board with this, and I would not say that you're a hypocrite, or I'm a hypocrite because we know some things about, you know, eating meat, and I think we're just still, you know, we're on a journey, and this is at the point where in our lives,
meat.
I don't know, it could happen. You never know. I mean, I think it potentially could happen for me. I just, like, it's a thing I wrestle with, and I understand that there are there are some implications that I'm not comfortable with. But I think some moral problems are like that you have a period of figuring it out in your life and wrestling with them, like, you know, not the way that you feel today about any particular issue doesn't necessarily represent like your final views as a human being forevermore on it. So
I do like a good burger, though. I'm not gonna lie.
oh, they're delicious. I mean, it's impossible to
Good old
deny.
burger.
Yeah, good old
Like
burger.
we call it good old burger. Anyway, I'm gonna pass the baton back to you, Doc.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll bring up what I think is probably my last big talking point. And I've, like, you know, talked a little bit about it or a lot about it here and there, but I'm just gonna try to like present the whole thing and put a bow on this nicely. So I was on Twitter a little while ago, and your friend and mine, friend of the pod, Buggy.
Hey,
We should add Buggy to the
Yeah,
friends
Buggy.
of the pod on Discord. I don't know why I've not done that, but I will do that. Buggy was saying that he was surprised that I was talking about empiricism the other week because, you know, the big thing that he thinks about when he thinks about GLT is absurdism. And I was like, you know, absolutely, like, yes, I've talked a little bit about that without saying the word absurdism at different points, but like I think he's dead on, and so I just want to like bring that fully out into the light here, and say like I think that the emotional core of the show is the show responding to the central problem, the central existentialist problem of absurdism. And that is that you wake up and you realize that there's no inherent meaning or inherent value in your life or the world, that order and structure and things like that are things that, like, you know, I mean, I'm not talking about like how the sun rises and sets or like things like that, you know, the sort of natural laws that more often than not, like, or not more often, that more likely than not will continue to be as they are and have the appearance of being this thing that's going to happen like clockwork. I'm more talking about like what you think is important, your life goals, what you think being a good human being is about, what you think living, like what you think the purpose of life is for, you know, things like that. That all of that is there's nothing out there with imposing objective values onto the world, objective answers to those kind of questions. So like, what do you do? And there's three basic answers that different philosophers have given. One is to kill yourself. That was what Camus did, basically. That he just couldn't take it. Like the world, life was just so fucking absurd to him that like all the pain and everything, the suffering just got to him. That like the meaninglessness of it all, right? And his own life. And then another answer is that you could be like Kierkegaard, right? And you could say like, well, there doesn't appear to be any meaning because like of our human brains, like we're thinking about things with human reason and human sense. And what we need to do is take this leap of faith, right? It is faith. It is like something that's contrary to reason, even though the leap itself may be reasonable. The act of what you're doing is an act of faith, and it is beyond like any evidence that exists in the world. You're just sort of believing that there's some kind of meaning and that will kind of bear out in the end. And then the third answer is the answer that Girls Last Tour chooses, is that like you kind of take a clear-eyed, sober look at everything and you say, well, you know, I've got the freedom now to construct my own meaning and place value on things that I think are important. And that doesn't, again, make it, is not a cheap kind of value, again, because that there's not some kind of god or cosmic being that could place something like objective value or importance on a life mission. So this is the best I've got. Like, this is and that's the best that anyone can have, right? And it is good and important. And so that is what Girls Last Tour does. You know, it has you and Chi saying, it has the last two human beings, for all intents and purposes, in a dying, or you might say dead even, world, and they look at each other and say, even if the world ends, as long as we're together, I'm happy. You know, like,
exactly.
We're gonna keep climbing for the rest of our lives until we reach the top. I don't know if there is a top.
To the moon, to the moon,
to the moon.
They want to go to the moon.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there could be something, and there could be nothing. But they're not. Their climb isn't because they're going to find something. It's they find meaning in the climbing because they're together doing the climbing, not because of what's at the summit, or that there is even a summit.
I mean, that's why the moon is actually the thing that they choose to go for, at least from a narrative sense, because, you know, even if they get there, the question ultimately then would be, now what? What do? We made it to the moon. What the fuck now? And the answer is, it doesn't matter, because they ultimately would still want to journey there. Like, it's the end goal. Like, as long as, I mean, this is also why the train episode or like segment exists, because it illustrates, you know, like the idea of constantly being in motion, of going on a journey and traveling. And as long as they are moving, this again ties into what I said about the robots, they are interacting with the world around them. They are finding new things. To remain still is death, you know. Being immobile is death as far as this shows. And I'm not talking like in the sense of like literally our bodies, but I mean in terms of like that we choose not to physically go out and interact with the rest of the world. Like, immobility could literally be, and I don't mean the sense like, because obviously we're in lockdown right now, I can't, like, this is what we do. But imagine like pre-pandemic that all you ever did was just stay inside your house. And you never spoke to anyone. You never opened up the curtains. You never opened the windows. And this is not me being derogatory to people who might have done that, but I'm just talking to be illustrative here. Like, that to me is the kind of immobility I'm referring to here, where you deliberately minimize your interactions with the world. Whereas being mobile, choosing to go on a journey of finding something, even if ultimately it turns out to be disappointing, at least you're still going out there to interact with the world, to be mobile, to, you know, engage with the world around you. And that's why, even after, and that's why, again, to re-stress this, even after they are told by the cuts that the world is literally going to die off, all life will end, they're like, we're still going to go there. We're still going to interact. We're still going to engage with the world around us. And that, to me, was really fucking powerful, because you think to yourself, you know what? Like, even when things are literally as bad as they are for them, you know, where they're in this post-apocalyptic world, they choose to continue to seek out, you know, to go forth, to look, to explore, to journey, to adventure, if you want to call it that.
Yes.
And that speaks to the beauty of the human spirit, I think, in that even when things are as bad as they are, there is still positives to be found in. It's, for all that this work is grey, and I mean literally is in the color scheme, like, you know, it's a very grayscale work. Like, I reckon you could actually do this in black and white if you wanted to, and not much would change. If anything, it might enhance the idea of it. But the point being is, like, you know, it's a very melancholy work, but it is a work that ultimately is positive in its affirmation of, hey, there's so little left, but there's so much that we can make from it if we choose to.
Yeah. There doesn't need to be any of that supplied to you from any kind of higher authority, be it cosmic or societal, governmental, parental, you know, whatever. And I should stress, so this is an interpretation. This is my interpretation of the work. And I'm speaking a lot, I think, in a tone that might suggest that the core premise of, you know, existential absurdism is like true, but like that's far from the case. I mean, there are many people all throughout history, from Plato to like current philosophers right now today, and regular people that think that there is like inherent value in the world, that whether it's assigned by like by God or by society, or just that there are these features of the world, there are these moral properties that exist in the world, and some things have them and some things don't, and some things like are bad because of that, and some things are not. So like there's all these different ways of thinking about the world and parsing it and trying to figure it out. But I just want to stress like that this is, I think, what I think is like the right way to approach the show, just because the setting of Girls Last Tour, I mean, is just a totally derelict world that it just screams out to me like there's nothing here, and it just feels like a depiction of what someone who buys into this sort of thing would think just existence would look like if you could paint a picture of what existence is, right? It's entirely kind of barren and devoid of a lot of stimuli and meaning making things that other people might think, give value to being in the world and experiencing it. But and then the show says like, no, you don't need that, to have a drink with your buddy and
yeah, exactly.
Do all this other kinds of things that make life worth living. You don't need to be following a map that you found. You don't need to be making an airplane. You don't need to be doing topography and chronicling the history. Like, all those things are fine, but like, I think those things are all stand-ins and metaphors for things that human beings do that they believe are like, that they believe are these kind of meaningful activities because other things in their life have told them that they are, not because they assign that kind of meaning to them. And when they lose the airplane, when they lose the map, that's representative of this kind of self-aware, like, you're like, oh my God, there's what am I living for? Like, what is the meaning of everything? And then you're faced with that kind of decision, right, that we talked about. And GLT says like, well, then you just, again, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get about the business of kind of creating a meaningful life for yourself, and giving that meaning, and then being that the fact that you gave meaning to what you did is what makes it special, not because anybody else did.
Yeah, absolutely. It is what you do with it in the end, and this show ultimately affirms that. To go back to a question we were asked before from Yukinon, as in what we expected from this show, I would not have expected to walk away with that message from this anime, but I am immensely glad I did. That is a really powerful way to end your show.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one final talking point myself, and then we'll wrap up.
Bring it.
And it goes something a bit like this. We talk about the montage scene in the submarine's command room, where I'm going to say, by the way, just as a minor, like, how did this work? Like, the camera apparently held the video footage of many different people, people who could not possibly have all had the same camera. And here's the thing: I don't care. I don't like the actual explanation for how this works. It could be that the submarine was linked into some sort of like social media site. You name it, I'm not bothered. I will note, by the way, that Kanazawa reappears in the camera reel, though, and he had a companion with him who obviously was not with him when we saw him early in the show's run, which I felt really sad about. That I was like, what happened to this person? Like, again, wherever your interpretation of it that happened, like, did they leave amicably? Did they leave because they fought? Is she dead? You name it. Like, the fact that he had to go through so much of his time alone is poor guy. Like, he seemed nice stuff from when we met him. But anyway, that's not the reason I'm bringing this bit up. As I mentioned before, this entire montage scene is basically has two themes to it. One of which is humanity at war and humanity at peace. We have humanity, in the run-up to war, where people are arguing over committees and politicians arguing in big, debate chambers. This is why I said about the UN, for example, but you could be anywhere you name, it doesn't matter. But then we have humanity at peace, where we see people living their lives. We see an orchestra, for example. We see the girls building the stuff at the school, which, by the way, is also meant to reflect on, again, what I've said before, that Chi and Yu should not be in this situation they're in. They should be doing what they're doing in school, having the time of their lives that kids would have at that age. That kind of thing. But those are the two sides of this coin that we are shown. Humanity at war and humanity at peace. What happens immediately after that? Yu is kidnapped by one of the cuts. And it's completely by accident. The cut was like glomp and didn't even recognize and went. And so now Chi has to actually commit. Do I want to follow the path of humanity at war, humanity at peace? This is the first time in the show, by the way, in which the girls, her specifically, have to commit to the idea of being a child soldier. Like she's fucking petrified.
Were you?
Peace. Were I? What do you mean? Was you?
No, were you, Shadon? Did that scene fill you with any kind of dread or anxiety? Because I think I really wanted to feel those things, but I just could. For whatever reason, I was like, "It's gonna be fine." I don't know what.
Goofy, perhaps.
What?
The cuts are too goofy, perhaps.
I guess so. I mean, but I was willing to buy into the surreality of it, like something so goofy, like like spoilers, that one scene in Madoka where the drawing chomps off mommy's head. Like I was willing to I was like, okay, I can go here, but like for whatever reason, I still it's like that scene, the first scene in the show. Maybe it's just the character designs. Maybe it's what's come before. I don't know, but I was like not fully. I just wasn't able to fully give myself over to the idea that there was a risk.
You mean when you turns her gun on Chi for the chocolate?
Right. There's a parallel in terms of me thinking this is supposed to be nervy and I'm supposed to feel anxious, but I just don't.
Well, here's the thing. I have 2 points to make to that. One of which is, firstly, thank you for bringing that scene up, because that'll be relevant to what I'm going to talk about in a moment. But also, again, to bring up Annihilation, the film that I watched recently and that Dan Olsen talks about, there's a scene at the end in which the character Lena is faced with a rainbow-coloured alien. Like, I want rainbow is maybe not the right word. It looks more like the kind of colours that you get if you've ever seen oil spill in water, where it's very marble colours, like that kind of thing. And that is terrifying, but then eventually it doesn't ultimately want to harm her. It's more a reflection of her actions. So anyway, she eventually realizes how to beat the alien. But the point being is that that because of the way that alien was designed, it was much more terrifying than the cuts, the adult cuts. So I see where you're coming from there, and I agree that I didn't quite feel the sense of, holy crap, shit just got real. Going into this. But I do think that Chi's like reactions to this really sold her sense of like, I am in deep shit now. I've actually got to load this rifle. I've got to get. But even though Yu is literally like still being gobbled when she gets on top of the submarine, she doesn't shoot. In the end, the better nature, the other side, the side of the coin of humanity at peace, wins out. Now, I do admit I wish this was portrayed more strongly, where perhaps, for example, it wasn't immediately obvious that Yu was in no danger. Like, she was on she had been glommed up, but then when we see on top of the submarine, she's popping out of the top of the cut, as opposed to completely digested. Which I think would have lent ambiguity to how Chi felt like, okay, she's gone, I've got to do something. Maybe I have to fire. But then she chooses to wait to communicate, because she knows these creatures can communicate. But nonetheless, the interpretation I take is that she had a choice. Do I shoot this fucking thing or not? And she chose not to. And this is the micro level of the entire macro element of the show, which is, do we choose to indulge in conflict, or do we choose to not, and therefore, be better than that? And given everything they've just seen, she chooses that. And this, again, is in the backdrop to everything we've seen through the show thus far. Like, for example, how they meet Kanazawa and Ishii, and they're suspicious of both of them. Because, who knows, maybe they might want to kill them and take their stuff. Who can say? Or even in the very first episode, the scene that you mentioned, where, Yu and Chi, briefly fight, and we think, like, they're scrabbling over fucking chocolate rations.
Yeah.
So it's the culmination of Chi's arc here throughout the entire show, which is she restrains herself a bit and lets, she gives peace a chance, shall we say. She lets things resolve in a way that doesn't come to an immediate necessitation of violence. She gives it a chance, and it turns out that works out in the end. Used just fine, and everything's good.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate that, because for one, it's a very personal capstone to their story, not least of which is what follows afterwards, where, as you said, even if the world does end, I'm glad I'm not doing it alone. I'm glad I have a friend. And that is a progression, again, from that scene I talked about earlier, just a minute ago, where they were like, oh, we're fighting over chocolate. No, they are truly affirmed as friends at this point, and not comrades, colleagues, soldiers in arms, you name it,
Yeah.
So it accomplishes both the macro level affirmation of the message of, hey, humanity's better nature, even if ultimately we do fuck up and the whole world comes to an end, humanity's better nature will still have the last laugh. But it also does the micro level element of these two characters finally affirm a proper friendship between each other. So it did both. And I'm like, you know what? Whenever something, I keep saying, why not both? And this show responded, yes, actually, I'll do both. There you go.
For sure.
And I fucking love that. And I think it's a great capstone to the show. And I think it perfectly also then, if you want to read the manga, you still feel like you've got a conclusion. They're going off into the sunset, so to speak, to see what they find next. And if you don't want to read any more of the manga, that's a perfect way for the show to end, because you can imagine where they end up as being whatever you like within reason. Maybe they do get to the moon. That's something that exists in your head, your own speculation. But it doesn't also preclude the fact that you can check out the manga as well and see what happens next for definite. But it still feels like a culmination of an arc and a journey for them both while starting a new one. And this is why I think this is a phenomenally good adaptation, because it is both self-contained as a work, but also advertises and promotes the material from which it is based on. And for that, it absolutely has my kudos.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree. Very well said. Unrelated note. I think a point that you made explicitly, this show was this one of these episodes. You were totally confirmed on when Chi was talking. I don't know if she's talking to herself or talking to the doggy bot or something like that, but it was in the vignette called Culture, and she said maybe it's people like you that create the culture in this world. It's see, she is the more creative, free spirit, and that's the show is coming out and saying that's how she kind of counterbalances Chi's rational, intellection and analytical nature, and that's why they're yin and yang, and that's why they need each other,
I guess. 100%.
Yeah. So okay, I think I'm talked out mostly.
I am too.
Yeah, so you ready to rate the episode?
I am.
Or sorry, the block of episodes and the show as a whole, I guess.
Yeah, we gotta give both at this point. Well, I'm actually doing both as one, and I am going to give Girls Last Tour the full 5 out of 5.
Ooh, oh.
I am not even going to restrain myself on saying this, but because here's the thing: I have to remind you all, 5 out of 5 does not mean it's my favorite thing ever. But I think for me, what I mean when I say a 5 out of 5 is that the show sets out to accomplish everything that it wants to do. It is the perfect execution of what I would call the elevator pitch, shall we say. And yeah, I had expectations going, they were exceeded. Once I got to grips with what the show was about, it delivered on it perfectly. The only complaints I have would be very minor ones, such as the fact that when they do have CG scenes of Chi and you on the Kessenkrat, it looks weird, but that's the most minor. That's the most minor of things, and they're only 5 small. Actually, I've just realized I didn't actually do a jokey reference, racing of it. So yeah, I will give this show 5 doggy robots out of 5. 5, robots that if they just fell over, they wouldn't be able to get back up. Like, how the fuck does that thing stand up again? But no, yeah, I think this show, this material, has a very specific goal in mind, and it sets out to do that, and it nails it. It absolutely fucking nails it. It is pretty much exactly what it wants to be, and that to me makes a 5 out of 5. I found this deeply engaging to watch. I think that the visual design, the color grading of it, and everything, all of that stuff was again perfectly suited for the material at hand. The music was fantastic. It still had its moments of levity, and those moments of levity, like I said in Wonder Egg, were not just there simply to make you laugh, but they had an actual cohesive, cogent narrative point behind them. I cannot really think of any major criticisms I have for this entire show beyond just, well, I'm glad it was paced as it was, and I wish they did a couple of things slightly differently, like make some things less ambiguous about the cuts, and particularly Chi's reaction to them when, of course, he was kidnapped. But no, this is a show that has that, for all its ambiguity, for all that we can talk about what things are, like I said before, where the cuts come from. Is this actually purgatory? Is this real life? For all that ambiguity, it has a very strong sense of purpose. And that I intensely admire about it. It is, it's an exceptional piece of work. It's not something I'd recommend to everyone. I think that you would have to be in a very specific mood to watch it, and be a very not even a very specific kind of person, but more just be in the mindset to be able to engage with it and give it a chance. And if you look at everything just as literal events and don't engage with it beyond that, this show will be boring as fuck for you. I'm sorry, but it will be. You won't find it in entertaining whatsoever. Like, it will be very dry. But if you give it a chance, if you just pop your head under the water for just a couple of minutes and see what lies beneath, I think there's a deeply rewarding work waiting for you here. So yeah, I'm not even ashamed to say that it's a 5 out of 5. Like, I think that it does everything it sets out to do, and it accomplishes it pretty much spot on. Yeah, a perfectly executed vision of its own intent, shall we say? Like, whatever you want to describe as. You basically had the point I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. So I love this show a lot for all the reasons you said. I think it's a visual feast. I think that it has a really important, meaningful message that, like you said, it's not for everyone. I think can make some people very anxious and would not be for everyone. But I think, for a lot of folks, it's going to, strike this deep chord within them. I think it's just strong characters, strong core, really, great ideas presented and played with in a way that, despite the ideas being lofty, it didn't really feel like a pretentious or obnoxious kind of show at all. Really great world building, science fiction storytelling. There's still some dangling mysteries there. I'm going to give this block of episodes, I think, I'll say, what's a good 4.75 windmills. And the wind power factory out of 5. And I'm going to give the show 4.5 final fish that exist on Earth out of 5, because now, extremely strong show, very just incredibly strong show, succeeds in what it sets out to do for sure. The reason that I don't give it the full 5, despite feeling pretty strongly about it, is the middle of the show, the pacing for me was a little slow, and I think as much as the show spoke to my brain, there was just a little bit something that it just didn't grab me by the heart in a way that many of the shows that I enthusiastically give the full 5 to do. So this really just speaks to like the difference of us as graders, as reviewers. But like, I
Hey,
would
it's one of the rare times I've given it more than you have. So again, put that in your calendars, folks. Like I
you're
feel
gonna
like I should
you're gonna
have a
have to
little
stop
balloon.
saying that.
Balloon.
You've said that a lot lately, but the
I know.
the meme might be dead.
Maybe my heart has indeed grown 3 sizes this day. Who can say?
But yeah, I mean, but at the same time, I just think this is a stellar anime, and I think more like it should be made. I'm very surprised it was made as recently as it was. I think that it is highly original and thought provoking, and really necessary. I think in like the modern anime landscape, as far as like television anime goes. I mean, it's so different to like a lot of what is out there. Even a lot of like the quote unquote good shows. I mean, this is just so different. It's just going for this totally different thing. Like, it's not trying to be this big blockbuster. It's not trying to be like the most entertaining show in the world for 24 minutes every week. Like,
I certainly wouldn't call it mass market, that's for sure.
No, it's really has a different set of goals, and I just admire that a lot. And I think it will be really great if more television productions had their own idiosyncratic kind of goals that they wanted to achieve, rather than being like this other anime from
100%.
seasons past. So great show, great pick, all you Viking experience havers. Thank you, Yukinon, for beating the drum for this one for so long.
Yeah, I'll just add on one small point to what Doc said there is that obviously me and him have rated it differently. I've given it higher. I've given the full 5. He's given 4.5. And I will say this, for all that I've said before about like, hey, take this show and then try and dig deep into it, try and read from it. Your meanings and readings from it are your own, as is your own enjoyment of it. And that is important and vital on its own. So although we've rated it highly, if you ultimately don't like the show, that's perfectly within your right, and that's perfectly fine. Like we're not the arbiters of quality or anything like that. I'm certainly not.
Yes, speak for yourself, Shadon.
But yeah, do definitely check it out. Give yourself the free episode try on this particularly. Just see if it wets your whistle. And if you then want to take it further, I guarantee you'll enjoy it. Anyway, on that note, we are done. Before we wrap up, I just want to again plug our Patreon, which can be found at patreon.com/Warui Deshou. We will soon be starting a brand new cycle of anime where people get to pick what we're going to watch, and God knows what that's going to be. Hopefully,
I don't even know what is coming down the pike. I don't look at this sort of thing normally.
It could be something atrocious, who knows? But if you want to get involved on that, do check that out. Again, 2 free $5 tiers get you increasing rewards, increasing benefits, all the way up to including, being able to decide what shows we pick next for this particular pod series, Deshou the Third, or our second stream format for that matter as well. Also get involved on asking us questions about the shows as they air, as we discuss them. And you can also get involved in our Discord community, which is pretty awesome. Everyone's pretty good in there.
Awesome. Yeah.
Pretty good. Get behind that. Can confirm. Pretty good people.
Totally.
So do definitely check that out. If you in turn, however, are listening to this on the free side and think, I don't have any money to spare, I don't or can't support them financially, totally cool that. Just drop us a like, subscribe, follow, share. Push all those buttons, fill all those boxes, tick all those things. For whatever avenue you may find us on, be it on Spotify, be it on Apple Music, you name it. Yeah, anything helps. Particularly if you can also leave us a rating. Definitely drop us the 5 stars. Think of it as like being generous to Mario. Give him all the stars.
Yeah. You hate finishing a level.
Basically.
You hate finishing a level and then not having that final star. It's a
exactly. Exactly.
Don't let that happen to us.
So definitely do that. You can also follow us at Warui Deshou on Twitter. I can be followed at Shadon1010 if you want to talk to me about stuff, I guess. I don't know what the kids are into these days. You can enlighten me on that. That kind of thing.
Talk to you about the latest TikToks.
Yes, TikTok, a thing that I am intimately familiar with. But anyway, Doc, over to you. Where can people find you on the world web?
At the Subtle Doctor. I'm there. Open open to talking about whatever you guys want. But hey, if you want to,
Golf.
if you want to ask me about what are you doing?
I said golf, and I was like,
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Like,
You know what? Like, definitely something I'm knowledgeable about. The golf. Absolutely not.
Don't tee him off.
No. Listen. I've played one round of golf, and it was an experience I would rather just forget. It was not good or fun. But no, listen. Yeah, that's where you can find me. I like to talk about anime and Japanese wrestling, kaiju movies, toku, whatevs, whatever you're into, we could talk about it at the Subtle Doctor on Twitter, the Twitter machine.
Indeed. All right, and that brings us to the end of Girls' Last Tour. I will more than likely in the coming weeks pick up the remaining volumes of the manga, so do follow me on Twitter, or if you're one of our patrons, I'll be talking about it there to follow up what happens with Chi and Yu in their final days, because I have a very strong feeling that they are not going to survive.
Oh no, don't say that.
Oh no! But
yeah,
but the manner in which they go out is what is important, and I'm gonna see that out to the end. But this, of course, for now is at the end of our anime discussion. This is the end of our latest session of the third season. Thank you again to everyone who's joined us, be it our patrons, live as I said, or otherwise if you come on the free. Your support is appreciated. Your listenership is immensely valuable. Thank you so much. Doc has something else to say?
Yeah. The rarest of rarities. I was stalling a moment ago because I wanted to see if we had any new iTunes reviews, and David M. Wine has given us a review. I believe David is one of the co-hosts of a podcast called Shonen Flop, and it's really great, because it's a play on Shonen Jump. Shonen Flop. It's about all the manga that are canceled very quickly in Shonen Jump.
Well, I was going to say, wasn't Promised Neverland published in Shonen Jump?
Yeah, but it flourished. It was not a flop. It was very much. It
won
awards.
The anime is definitely
yeah.
The anime is definitely been a Shonen flop.
Hey, yeah, for sure. So that's a really cool podcast. You recommend listening to that. But David gave us a review. He says, as a fellow weeb, this is a great show. They cover a wide range of different anime/manga and make sure to bring you along for the ride so you don't get confused. Be sure to check them out for some insightful talk and great banter. Thank you, David.
Do you reckon you left it on the wrong page?
Yeah, that doesn't sound like us.
No, thank you for that, David. I appreciate it immensely. Thanks. And in turn, if you yourself would be willing to leave us a review on Apple Music or Spotify, please feel free to do so. It helps our discoverability. Always welcome.
Yes. Did I mention that was an iTunes review? Something like that?
I keep saying I said Apple Music because
it's the same thing.
Apple Music, iTunes.
Apple Podcasts is the app.
The Apple Music falls not far from the iPod tree, whatever. Anyway, right. On that note, then, ladies, gentlemen, MBs, we're going to wrap this up. I'm going to go drink some more vodka and chill the F out for the rest of the evening. But for all of you who've joined us, thank you very much again for your listenership. Thank you for your support. I hope you all take care, stay safe, look after yourselves, and engage with the media around you that you consume. You'll all be better for it. I promise you that. But until next time, wherever we cover next on Deshou the Third, our premium $5 patron tier podcast, I've been Shadon. He's been the Soul Doctor. You've been amazing. Until next time, everyone, embrace each other to the ends of the universe. Good night.
Bring back the brothers.